Oh, okay.
All right, Mr. Best, let's get started.
Welcome to the May 2nd, 2019 Arlington County Transportation Commission. Item 1 is citizen comment. We have no speakers for item 1. Item 2 is the I-66 operational overview, and we have VDOT here this evening. We have David Caudill and also Monica Bhatia here from VDOT to give us an overview.
Good evening, everyone. All right. So we have the first slide, of course, that just covers our names and our beautiful I-66 inside Beltway. Can we move? On this one, we are going to cover the first year performance of I-66. Only for the purposes of traffic and speed comparisons, we are taking which is December of 2016 to November of 2017, and the post is December of 2017 to November of 2018. And then we have given peak time travel speeds for eastbound 66 and comparison on parallel arterials. And in the evening, westbound, same thing. And then we have some toll rates and usage data, morning shoulder period analysis, and incidents, and toll violation process. So as you can see, the average speed on entire 66 eastbound actually has gone up since we started. The blue line is the after, and the yellow line is before. So there is a 12.2% increase, but as you can see, the most of the average increase is coming from the time that used to be non-tolling before, as the graph shows very clearly. The speed during the actual peak rush hour is very comparable to what it was before and now. These are our segments on I-66, how they are divided with our gantry structures. Segment 1, segment 2, and 3 and 4. So segment 1 is like from 495 all the way to Route 7, and then from Route 7 to 29, and then from 29 to Glebe Road, and the last one again goes to 29. So in these segments, we are going to compare and show you how the system is performing before and after. So this is the first segment. This segment wasn't that bad even before when we started tolling. So there is a marginal increase of 3.2%, and you can see from the two lines they're very comparable to each other. Segment 2 and 3 were our major problem segments. So let's go to segment 2. Segment 2, again, if you see that the major gains that we are having are at the time when we used to have, that were not HOV before. So there we have gained a whole lot of speed, where we used to have a whole lot of backups before. That is between 5:30 and 7 time frame, and again between 9 and 9:30 time frame. And on this segment, we have gained 30.2% on the speed. We used to be averaging around 41.4%, and now we are at 43.9 miles per hour. Segment 3, same, almost same, but the increase is not as much because we were at 47.9 miles per hour before. We are at 54 now. The increase is 12.7%. Again, if you see on the graph, before where we were actually going below 40 was the time frame that was non-HOV hours. And the segment 4, there's not a huge difference. Of course, that's the part of the Arlington that's like most used part, and we have only gained around 1% on that. We were averaging around 48 miles per hour. We are at 48.5 miles per hour now. So now we are comparing that what it has done to the parallel arterials. So this is the 50 eastbound AM average travel speed. We have gained around 2.8, not much difference. So we actually have done better on 50 even after we have introduced tolling. So the system hasn't actually degraded any of the parallel arterial, except for there's a minor decrease on George Washington Parkway. And there were other things that were happening on George Washington Parkway in this 1 year that could have impacts other than tolling. Route 29, we have a 10% increase in speed there. We were doing 20.9 miles per hour. Now we are at 23, and it's a 10% increase. Then we have Route 7, eastbound, and there also we are seeing a 6.5% increase from before. George Washington Parkway, as I mentioned, there's a slight decrease. It has gone down from 39.1 miles per hour to 39, which is a 0.3% decrease. Now we are on the westbound side. Westbound, we have seen a 19.2% increase in the speed. It was averaging 46.4, and now it's at 55.3 miles per hour. Again, the major gains, as you can see, are in the non-HOV hours that we had before, where the speed actually dipped below or right around 30, and now we are able to keep it right around 50 miles per hour. We have, again, the 4 segments like we compare on the eastbound side. On the westbound side, the first segment is the Arlington segment, and there's an increase of 17.6% in the speed there. Again, it's non-HOV hours where we see the most gain. Segment 3, 20.2% increase in the speed. Segment 2, 3.2% increase, because segment 2 was actually doing not that bad before also. It's 59.1, and that's westbound. Eastbound segment 2 is really, it was bad, but westbound segment 2 wasn't that bad because we have made some changes before on segment 2 that had actually improved the speeds on segment 2. So it has gone up from 59.1 to 61 miles per hour. It's a 3.2% increase. And this is the segment 1, where we have gained 25.4%. The speeds, average speed was 40.1 and has gone to 50.3. Again, we are comparing the parallel arterials for westbound. On 50 westbound, PM average speed has gone up by 3%. 29 westbound, average speed has gone up by 7.5%. 7 westbound, speed has gone up by 6.3%. And George Washington Parkway northbound in the PM actually has gone up by 5.5%. So the only one that we have seen a slight decrease is the southbound in the mornings on George Washington Parkway. Now we have some toll rates and usage data. The average trip for the first whole year that we started on December 4th of 2017 to November 30th of 2018, the average toll round trip price was $12.59, and in the mornings it was for the eastbound trips it's $8.02, and westbound trip is $4.57. There were total average daily trips of around 31,739. Morning trips are 14,435, evening trips 17,304. Out of all these trips, 42.9% of these trips were HOV trips. We have more HOV trips in the morning eastbound direction, 48.6, and 38.1 westbound trips. You probably all of you have heard about us charging people $47, but out of all the trips, we had close to 7.5 million trips in the first year. Out of those 7.5 million trips, only 0.13% of the toll payers actually paid over $40. These tolls usually are experienced during peak of the peak, which is between 8 to 9 p.m. And HOV usage is really, really high during those times. And I have a chart here which shows the HOV and how it has increased between months. So when we first started in December, the HOV was like 53.3% between 7 and 7:30. In May of 2018, it went up to 56.6%, and in November, it went up to 59.5%. So the HOV is consistently increasing, and as you can see, that between the 7 and 8 hours, it's now touching around 63, 64%. Now these are the toll rates that we see, and this chart is important because it actually shows that whenever we are charging people, we are at capacity because our HOV percentages are very high. So on this chart, you see that when we first start, we are starting with $2.67. At that time, our HOV percentage is 33%. So the solo drivers are getting the benefit, and they can pay low, and they can still go. So all these people that were traveling on this road before as solo drivers, because we didn't have the HOV restriction until 6:30, they can still pretty much use the road by paying a very low amount and use the road. And if you see between 7:30 and 9, the toll prices actually are much higher, the average toll pricing, and at that time our HOV percentages are really, really high. So that's why the capacity is taken by the HOV drivers, and we do not have as much capacity for the solo drivers, and that's what drives the prices. Westbound side, PM, the toll price pretty much stay very stable. Is because we have a different traffic pattern on westbound. And also, for some reason, the westbound HOV is not as high as it gets in the morning, eastbound direction. But again, if you look at the pricing here, where we have higher prices, like $6.84 or $7.58, it corresponds with higher HOV rate. Now, these are our total average trips for each month, eastbound and westbound, and then we are showing how much of those total trips are HOV trips. And like I said, we have a 42.9% total trips that are HOV. What we had observed, and actually this was a better chart when we had first done in 6 months, that number of incidents actually went down a lot. But when we did the year average, it's not a huge increase, but we were still able to decrease the number of incidents that happened on 66. So prior to tolling, we had 1,077 crashes. Post-tolling, we have 1,035 crashes on eastbound side, and on the westbound side, we had 1,085 pre-tolling crashes. They have gone down to 1,013. There's a So now it's toll violation, and David is going to cover that.
Good evening. David Caudill, I'm the division administrator for tolling for VDOT. Monica is the facility manager for 66, so she does this day-to-day, or did. She's taking another job now. Hope I didn't run her off. And then John Mason is the acting facility director, and so he does the day-to-day operation. One of my responsibilities is to operate the back office, what we call the back office that VDOT runs, and that's where all the Easy Pass transactions clear. And also, we do our violations for the VDOT facilities and a couple others who have contracted with us. So VDOT performs its own violation process. And just to kind of help out with the definition, a toll violation on 66 occurs when someone doesn't have an Easy Pass account or has an Easy Pass account that's not funded. So that's how you get a toll violation. The process we use to collect on those unpaid tolls is supported by Code Section 33.2503. And there's facilities out there currently. What we're seeing is that nearly 90% of the users of the facility are using an Easy Pass transponder. We're getting that level of read, which is pretty good, actually very good. 10%, for whatever reason, we're not reading a transponder, or at least a valid transponder. That turns into an image-based transaction where we take a picture of the license plate. Not all those actually roll off to become a violation. Half of those, actually just barely more than half, actually we can match up to a valid Easy Pass account in our downstream, what we call our VTOL process. So if you've got your license plate on your account, even though for whatever reason we didn't get the transponder read, we'll match it up further down the process when we tie it to your account, and then we can make the deduction and you won't get a notice. If you do get a notice, you didn't have an Easy Pass account or it wasn't funded, it's actually 2 sheets of paper. There's a front and a back, and on that notice will be an image of the vehicle, and it'll be your name. And that information comes from DMV. We read the license plate, we send that information to DMV, we get the registered owner information. It gives you what amounts due and how to make payment. On the back, there's the dispute resolution process, and on the third, which would be the front of the second sheet, it gives you the detail of that trip. The one thing to point out on this facility, on the first notice, we're not charging administrative fees. The secretary, as well as the commissioner, wanted a very long grace period to make sure everyone understands how the road operates. I don't know how long that's going to remain in effect. Typical administration fee is $12.50, but currently on 66, and also we have a road in Hampton Roads, 64 express lanes. There's no admin fee on either one of those facilities currently. As far as our stand up straight here, my back hurts. As far as our our process, I mentioned that if you had an Easy Pass account but we didn't get a transponder read, we'll match it up on the what we call a VTOL, and there's no charge or any of that for that. If you didn't have a transponder and you realize it after the fact, and you don't have an Easy Pass account, there's a missed to toll process. There's $1.50 if you go online and pay that. You enter your license plate, it'll find that violation within 5 days, and it'll clear it at that point. If it hasn't been cleared, then it rolls off to that first notice, that example I showed earlier. It says here $12.50. That's the typical admin fee. On this facility, we're not charging that admin fee on the first notice. If that goes unpaid for 30 days, it moves on to the second notice. There's a $25 administration fee for that. If it rolls off, if there's no response on the second notice, it will end up in collections. There's a $35 fee added to the toll in the collections point. And if it's not addressed in collections, then you roll off into the summons process and then you end up in court. Hopefully there's opportunities to pay even before you go in front of a judge at a reduced rate. What's next? Next one? Yeah, we'll go ahead and let you finish off. I was going to ask, were there any other questions on the violation side? I was going to hand it back to Monica to get the conclusion, but I didn't want to. Yeah. Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Commissioner Clement.
First, I want to clarify that these violations are the kind of violations involving somebody who inadvertently
Your mic's not on, Commissioner Clement.
did not have his or her Easy Pass. Okay, I'm trying to distinguish this type of violation from somebody who deliberately, who has a pass, but switches his transponder to HOV. That's a different category, is that correct?
That's correct. So there's two kinds of violations. There's an HOV violation, where someone who's not identified the trip correctly, they've got their transponder in the wrong setting, and then there's someone who doesn't have a transponder at all, or has an account that doesn't pay.
All right,
have
I'm
money on it.
interested in the first category. Are you going to report on that? The category meaning that somebody who switches his transponder to HOV when in fact he's a solo driver.
So that information is difficult to come by now. What we have, as far as our enforcement process, we have a contract with the Virginia State Police, and they have to make a visual confirmation. And so when they go through the facility and they have the flex transponder marked or slid over to the HOV mode, there's a beacon on the gantry that will light up. There's Virginia State Police just about at every gantry location that will look over and count the number of heads in the vehicle, and if it doesn't match the HOV requirement, in this case, at least 2 or more, then they're subject to be pulled. I know Virginia State Police, and I've got some records as far as how many summons they're writing. Typically, it's about 30 a month is what I'm seeing. And then the fines are pretty steep on the second and third. The first time they appear in court, I think it's $125.
Yes, if I get some leave here from the chair, I want to ask you, one of the local organizations here, ACST, did an FOIA request several months ago, and it found out that in the 53-week period ending December of 2018, there were 702 HOV citations, basically for a year. Okay, which averages 2.7 citations for every 8 hours of tolling. So that would be 3 per day.
About right, yeah, that's
Okay. Now, well,
30.
was that if we did a little math, and we figured that if we did in fact have a 99% compliance rate, we should get many more toll cheaters picked up by the Virginia State Police. Basically, we would expect to get about 140. Instead, we get 3 per day. So we're concerned about that this phenomenon is being undercounted. It's being under-enforced. And as a result, that's driving up, or maybe driving up, tolls and causing bad publicity. Our primary concern is not to beat up on VDOT or VSP, but to keep this program in place. And the more political fallout we get, the harder that is.
Right. Yeah, and it's a challenge. I'll admit that. We are currently working with our integrator to come up with some pilot opportunities that are more electronic-based. I mean, it's challenging when that traffic gets busy for a Virginia State Police officer to look at the light, count the heads in the car, then run them down, write a citation, make his way back around and reset. That's hard. I mean, and to your point, we're not catching everyone by no means. It mostly serves as a deterrent in its current form. But we are piloting, or trying to pilot, some electronic approaches. And we're also teaming up with our partners in Transurban to do the same kind of thing. And we think there's an opportunity there to have better enforcement. It's always going to be a challenge, and to your point, it's right. You're right, the Secretary is also very interested in coming up with some kind of way, because it does impact the tolls probably, and most certainly. If there's less traffic, then the single occupant toll pays less, the solo driver. So if you can drive down the density or make people pay who should be paying, then everyone's playing by the same rules.
Yeah, I just find this very frustrating, because VDOT was here before tolling went in place to talk about, why we were doing Transform Inside. And one of the main reasons that was presented was that HOV violations on 66 were rampant then. And we had the data then I presume from somebody standing by the side of the road and visually counting heads inside cars as they went down the ramp onto 66 during the HOV periods. So A, it seems like if we are actually concerned that this is a problem, getting the data is not that hard. You just do that same kind of study again, and we can find out if this is something we need to be devoting more resources to do. And second, we were told in the lead up to tolling on 66 that this was going to be the solution to the HOV violation problem, that HOV violations on the 495 express lanes were very low, and that we were going to do enforcement the same way on 66, and so that was going to solve the problem. And yet here we are having this conversation again.
So I can't tell you how many people are cheating, right? You could do a manual count. What we've seen from our partners in California, that's not as accurate as I would have thought, right? They make mistakes too, counting the heads. There's a vehicle occupancy detection program. It's where you set up facilities at different locations where you can, that equipment does a better job. It's probably in the upper mid 90% in accuracy. And that gives you the kind of data that you can rely on. But even if you had the data, you got to come up with a measure to how are you going to address and enforce people and make sure that they're following the rules. And this was a pilot part that we're talking about internally. We haven't mapped that out completely. We're working with our integrator. It's coming. It's something the Secretary is very interested in installing. He's working with Transurban as well as the outside of Beltway folks. We recognize that's where we got to focus because I think that's where the toll that single occupant vehicles are paying. That's why it's going to the level it is. That's why you're seeing the HOV percentage in excess of 60% during those peak periods. When it gets that high, there's no capacity left for us to meet our speed goals. We have to have a toll that high to dissuade single occupant access. So we do have a plan to address what we think is how we're going to do better enforcement on HOV. Right now, the best we have is Virginia State Police, and it's not cheap by any means, but they're out there. And we also do, and we did it in December, we have these periods of blitz where we actually have additional officers show up. Again, not cheap, but it serves as to provide us a benchmark and see what people are correcting on their transponders. We advertise it well, and we say, oh, okay, so now that HOV rate went from 60% to 57%. Are those the 3% that aren't playing by the rules, right? That gives us some indication too. So we're aware of it. We're trying to address it. We've got a pilot program in the works.
Commissioner Lantoni?
There is,
How big are the readers? Do the readers of the transponders that are up on the gantry, they look like they're about this big?
Yeah.
Are there portable ones? Could we issue something like that to the state troopers who could wait at the entrances to the interstate? Because it used to be, if it was all HOV and you turned on to, let's say, Glebe Road to go down onto 66, the troopers would be right at the bottom there, and they'd pull over every single car that had just one person in it. You'd see it almost looked like a parking lot some days. If they had a handheld, just hold it, it turns on the light, the cop down there pulls them over, that would seem to be pretty easy to enforce. But I don't know whether technologically the readers have to be huge or whether they could be portable. But something like that seems like it could work.
They do make some that are built into some of the state troopers' cars. I think Transurban is using that. It's not as effective as setting it up because downstream's having the light, and then looking over. To have that equipment in your car is challenging, but they do have that. We also have a handheld reader that once we do pull somebody over for an HOV violation, the reader can always go back and change it, say, oh, no, I was in that position, so something on your side worked. We have a handheld reader that holds up to that transponder. It can read the last setting as he went through the previous gantry. So we're trying to account for some of that. Excuse me. To your point about having it on vehicles, I'm not sure we'd get the biggest bang for the buck. I think going down this VOD, this vehicle occupancy approach, to identify how bad it is, because we truly don't know. We know it's something, but we don't know the exact number. and then tackle those individuals who appear to be not following the rules. We know we would be able to tell who they were, right, because they have a transponder. We know the transponder is registered to somebody. We can work with them, right? We see this, that pattern's got to stop, that kind of thing.
Commissioner Calkins.
Thank you for coming and giving a presentation this evening. I'm actually a big fan of the Inside the Beltway hot lanes. I think they're a really effective way of using our limited roadway space. I don't know if we asked you to present on it tonight or not, but I do think one of the reasons why I like this project so much is that it is a publicly operated and the facility. Can you speak just a little bit to, I'm aware, but just for edification's sake, of the way these tolls are being used, and that they're not only increasing speeds, and I know that we want to try and fix scofflaws, but I understand too that trying to pull people over on a fast-moving freeway creates safety issues as well, so there's also a balance between how often we can pull people over. But could you speak a little bit to if there's been an increase in some of the bus usage for the outside the Beltway programs that have happened, and or if you've seen improvements to the spot improvements and the extra things that have happened inside the Beltway as far as multimodal projects go?
I can speak a little bit to that, but I was thinking maybe NVTC is going to be here to present that part because they are the one that manage that. But according to what have been reported through NVTC, there is increase in bus usage, especially the one that's the Fairfax County connector bus that they have started. And they says that the usage on that has gone up almost 100%. So there is a lot of people that are moving in the buses. And then all of the revenue that has been generated after taking just the operations money out of this, the money goes back to NVTC to fund more of these projects. And they have actually funded several park and ride lots. They're coming up with other partnerships that they're doing with Uber and Lyft, so they could actually arrange for people to take rides to the nearest metro station or something to use for that. So there are a lot of initiatives that they have put in place that they're building. We have actually funded them already with $19.8 million. And all of the revenue that comes, it's actually funded directly after quarter after quarter to them. So there is all this. I only had like one small thing at the end where I said that we are reinvesting this revenue with NVTC, and I did not bring the details because I was thinking that NVTC might be invited here to give that part of the presentation.
Any other questions for the folks at VDOT?
I have one thing I wanted to add for Chris. I know you asked a question about we were able to count people before with like sniper type people standing on the road, count the heads. We cannot do that with tolling now because we have people that are single solo drivers and double. So we don't really know who we are counting now.
Right,
so
without
that
being able to
technique we
read the-
cannot use anymore.
Without being able to read the transponder, you
Exactly.
can't just spot people.
Yes.
Sounds like a job for one of those portable transponders.
Yeah.
Commissioner Rose. You're on.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Just a quick question about one of the slides. You made a point about 0.13% where it paid more than $40, and I wasn't sure what the context of the $40 was. During a day or
It was $40 for a trip.
per trip? Okay.
Yes, per trip.
And what? Okay.
And it was the 0.13 that we have counted, as I said, it was like 7.5 million trips. So that's a very small number.
And it
of
didn't matter
people.
which segment it was on. It was
It
just
was a
from
full
point-
trip that somebody took eastbound. We have never gone to $40 on westbound.
Yeah.
The highest we have gone on westbound is, I think, $29. So it's only eastbound direction that we have touched $47.50.
between that 7:30 to 8:30 time period,
Exactly,
probably. Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else? I really appreciate you guys coming out. I'm glad to hear that pilot programs at least are on the works to try and get a handle on this, because HOV violators are slowing down legitimate HOV drivers. They are driving up the costs of people who are legally paying the tolls, and they are taking money that could be being used for multimodal transportation projects to keep us all moving. So. we need to
Thank you.
get a
We
handle on
agree
this
with
problem.
everything you said. We agree with 100% everything you're saying. And I actually partnered with VSP. I was trying to do more blitz but they are also constrained in their resources. And then the way the things are right now, especially in wintertime, with the things being dark so quickly, they are not able to pull a whole lot of people, and they're not able to see inside the cars. So there are limitations. So that's why this pilot that we are doing, which is electronic program, which would help us in finding more people that are violating.
Sorry, one last thing I forgot to ask about. This FOIA request that I was reading about seems to indicate that VSP is supposed to have at least 4 troopers doing enforcement on I-66 every day?
Exactly.
Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
And yet, it seems like we're only seeing like 30 to 40 violations a month, despite
That is
having
correct.
4 troopers every day doing.
See, what happens is they bring 4 troopers in the morning at 5:30, and then something happens, like some car goes speeding by or whatever. So they are dedicated, but they still think that this is something they're helping the facility, so they start doing some other things, like give speeding violations or whatever to people, and that kind of slows them down. Although we are saying they're dedicated to just tolling and they shouldn't be chasing other stuff, but this is, we are inside Beltway, we see something, we just can't ignore it.
All right. Thank you very much.
If we could take a minute or so to get the PowerPoint changed up for item 3, our age-friendly.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Item 3 is the age-friendly program, and we have our friends from the Commission on Aging. We have Joan McDermott and also Craig Hayes. So, welcome.
Thanks. I'm Craig Hines, the chair of the Transportation Committee of the Arlington Commission on Aging, and Joan McDermott is a former chair of the Commission on Aging, as well as a former member of the Transportation Commission through her Planning Commission membership. We've asked for time tonight to tell you about the major current project of the Commission on Aging and to invite your input. For several decades, Arlington has, in response to national, state, local stimuli, paid close attention to the needs of its growing community of older residents. The Commission on Aging is, in fact, the goal is to make Arlington a place where seniors thrive. Arlington is already a great place for seniors to live. It ranks first among regional jurisdictions on the AARP Livability Index, which is sort of the best-known league table. And we score ahead of such cities as Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. To maintain and improve on this standing, County Board has approved the Commission on Aging's request to participate in the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Communities plan, for which the U.S. partner is AARP. One driver of this is the steadily increasing percentage of seniors in Arlington, currently an estimated 14% and headed up.
Worldwide, the population.
Need to, I think.
Is it on?
I didn't.
Okay. Worldwide, the population is aging. The United States is no exception. By 2035, there will be more people 65 and older in the United States than there are children. And in Arlington currently, there are 35,000 people who are 60 or older. And it's a virtually countrywide phenomenon. Perhaps the strongest sentiment among seniors is that what they want to do is to age in place, meaning their current residence, or they want to age in the community, meaning near their current residence. This is a national sentiment as well as a local one, as shown by repeated surveys at Arlington's public engagement forums for seniors. And the last one that we held was in March. We do that every year.
Here's how AARP spells it out: housing, transportation, and other community features that enhance personal independence. There is a very AARP statement there, but believe me, it's boiling down to making the whole community responsive to senior needs and making seniors part of the community. Here's a quick look at the states and communities already in the age-friendly network.
And when Arlington's application was accepted, we became the 250th community.
And here are the 8 domains addressed by the age-friendly process. It's hardly a secret that transportation, housing, and health are major concerns. Here is the process. We're in the process of conducting a survey and listening sessions such as this. We create an action plan, there's implementation, and then after 5 years, there's progress, which means you start all over and go back through the process. And here's where we are now. This sort of spells out what the former chart went through. Transportation, convenience, options, cost, safe streets, accessibility, and commitment to livability are the main things we will be looking at and wanting to hear from the sort of transportation thought leaders such as yourself as we develop the program. And we need your input. And here's the ask. As the county leader on transportation, what do you know that we need to know in moving forward with what will amount to Arlington's master plan for seniors? Joan has some material and also sort of the format we've been using to ask for community input.
So I have some paper for you, and the first one is in a livable community, people of all ages can, and the ones that are up at the top all have to do with transportation, and maybe you can pass those out to the commission members. But then, more importantly, we have a survey, and it's called Age Friendly Arlington. And as Craig said, we're in the process of collecting information and listening, our first year. So I know I'm holding this on paper, and I will have those passed out to you too, but you also can go online and do it. And we are hoping that you will fill it out, and it's in different categories: questions on housing, outdoor spaces and buildings, respect and social inclusion, communication and information, transportation, and economic stability. And those categories fit right in with the 8 domains that are in the age-friendly program. And as Craig had said in one of the slides, this AARP program is under the auspices of the World Health Organization. That is where it started. So we would like your questions, if you have some for us.
I just want to thank you for coming out. We so rarely get to cross-commission converse. It's great to have a window into what other commissions are doing. I look forward to digging into the survey and sharing my thoughts. I don't know if
There
you
are
have any-
reams and reams of material. AARP is thorough, if nothing else. And for any piece of the transportation puzzle, seniors are very interested in scooters. I have a picture of the chair of the Commission on Aging on a scooter, but that may be the only one. But so all of the issues, like parking in the metro corridors, we are very interested in that, because almost everything, seniors would love a seat at the table for all of it. But we're very happy, urge you to weigh in on what ideas that you have, and this process will go on for 6 months or so.
Commissioner Price?
Yeah, I concur, I agree. Thank you so much for coming out and speaking with us. I actually only have a request. I love surveys, and I love SurveyMonkey. Can you forward this to Mr. Best so he can send it to all of us?
Sure.
The thought of taking paper and then typing in a
Right.
URL when I could just click a link, because I do that.
We are from the Commission on Aging.
And in my professional life, I deal with transportation issues for seniors and for people with disabilities, so I appreciate all the information.
I'm getting there,
Yeah,
yes.
and the address, the SurveyMonkey address is up at the top of the survey.
No one's going to type that in. We just
Oh,
click a link. No one's
okay.
typing
You
that.
want it sent
Just-
to
I want,
click.
just send it to Mr. Best. We'll all get it. We'll all fill it out. So thank you.
Oh, I
We are-
like that, what you just said. We'll all fill it out.
I
we
promised
can
on
be
behalf
very-
of everybody.
We can be very clickable.
Yes.
Thanks very
Okay.
much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
And our next item is item number 4. This is the I-395 commuter choice application. This is an action item, and we have Dan Maloff here this evening.
Hello, everyone. All right. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a while since I was here. I'm here to tell you about the I-395-95 Commuter Choice Inaugural Program, which is a jargony way to say the toll revenue for I-395 hot lanes. They are scheduled to begin operations in October of this year, and so starting now, with money available this summer, the first round of before opening money comes online. After this year, it'll be toll revenue. This year, it's the concessionaire had to make a payment ahead of time. So this program is really similar to the I-66 Commuter Choice Program, which you should be familiar with. Every year, there will be about $15 million of funding for multimodal improvements in the I-395-95 corridor. You apply for grants to fund projects, and I'm here to tell you about our recommendations for grant requests. We will make these applications to NVTC, and I'm asking you to endorse them so the county board can endorse them as well. As I said, basics of the program, $15 million annually beginning in FY20. That'll escalate every year with inflation. NVTC and PRTC run the program. I'm not going to explain what those acronyms are unless you need me to. They score all of the applications based on factors like person throughput, travel time change, et cetera. They come out with a score for each project and award grants based on that. Projects don't have to be exactly on I-395 or 95. They just have to benefit the toll-paying users of those facilities. So they could be a parallel bus line or something like that that takes drivers off, frees up capacity on the roadway. Projects cannot be things that don't benefit the toll-paying users of I-395. So a beautification project, we would have a lot of trouble making a case for. A primarily east-west improvement project, something at Ballston Metro or on Lee Highway, we would have a lot of trouble making a case for this pot of money. So most of these are north-south projects. Bus operations usually score the best. If your project is adding buses, improving frequency, you're very likely to get funding, but only 50% of the money can go to bus operations. The other 50% goes to capital, so it's good to have a little mix of what you apply for. Two big differences on I-395 money compared to I-66 program. One of them is that this year on the I-395 program, there's a big emphasis on toll day one. They want to have projects that can be funded and completed by this October when the tolls begin, so that they can say, here are some things that are opening at the same time as the tolls. I don't have to tell you, October of this year is really, really soon, so that constrains us in what we think we can realistically get money to do. The other big difference between this and I-66 is there's less money and more competition here compared to I-66. I-66's most recent round had $20 million, this one has 15, and I-66 was basically, the eligible jurisdictions that could apply for that was basically everyone from Prince William County to here. On the I-395 corridor, it's everyone from Loudoun County all the way down to Spotsylvania County south of Fredericksburg. So there's about twice as many potential applicants and only 75% as much money. We're not going to get as much. Our usual method in terms of determining projects to apply for, this won't be anything you haven't heard before, previous times I've been up here. We scrub our existing plans, look for eligible projects that are either unfunded or funded with local money that we could then swap out and use the local money on something else. Then we look at that list, narrow it down by finding the best possibilities based on a combination of need and competitiveness. Now, we don't want to apply for a project it's not going to be competitive to the application. So with that, we settled on this list of 6 projects that you should have in front of you. I hope everyone got a little handout. They're in priority order. NVTC, when they put out this call for projects, did ask us to prioritize them. And I do want to just warn you, in case you were really, really on the ball and read your board report, that this is slightly different than what you saw in the board report. Some of the projects have evolved a little bit as we've gone through the application process in terms of what we think we can accomplish by October and what might be the best use for these monies. So it's the same projects that you saw in the board report, but I'm going to describe them a little bit differently as I go through them one by one right now. The top priority on our project list is the Crystal City Potomac Yard Transitway running way improvements. What this would be basically is adding red to the pavement on the busway. And the reason for that is that in the last about 2 years, there's been a lot of research that has come out that shows that that is an extremely, extremely effective way of keeping car drivers out of the bus lanes. You wouldn't think that it would be, but the visibility of it just people that think, I guess they could say, I didn't know, they can't say that, so they stay out. This is becoming standard practice in bus lanes across the country. DDOT is going to be doing it this summer on a number of bus lanes. They already have one that has the red pavement. If you've been in New York or San Francisco or Seattle, you may have seen it. So that's a good project. It's going to improve the safety and the speed and the reliability of buses in the busway. Inexpensive, it can be done by toll day one. We think it's a real winner. The next 3 projects on the priority list are all Metro bus service improvements. These are all just a little different than what you may have seen in the board report, so I'm going to walk you through them. The top one is Metrobus 7Y South Eade Street PM service. This is kind of a hokey thing. I've given you the handout shows you the 3 bus lines that I'm going to describe because, shocker, you may not have all memorized. Raise your hands if you've memorized every bus line in Arlington. Right, you should all be raising your hands. I have not. I had to look up the maps. So the 7Y goes from Mark Center to Shirlington to the Pentagon to Farragut. It has this funky route. You can see it on the handout. There's a lot of twists and turns. In the morning, that bus stops in Pentagon City. In the evening, it doesn't, which is weird and inconvenient for riders who maybe could get on the bus in the morning but can't in the evening. The reason for this is because of the traffic patterns in the morning versus the evening, it takes longer to have the bus get off at Pentagon City and stop there in the evenings than it does in the morning. So much longer, about 5 minutes, that we can't keep up the same headways with the same number of buses. right? We run 3 buses on that route. If we stopped there in the afternoons, we'd have to have a bus much less frequently on the entire line. Or we could have one more bus and have the same headways or even better, which is what this application does. Basically, it funds 1 additional bus on this bus line so that we can keep up headways and stop in Pentagon City in the evening. There's also some associated bus stop improvements in Pentagon City because the bus stop that it would stop at in the afternoon is not the same one as it would stop at in the morning. Next project is the Metrobus 22F reliability improvements. This is a little different than what it said in the board report. So the 22F goes from Fairlington to the Pentagon via I-395. Fairlington buses, including but not limited to the 22F, come pretty often, but they bunch a lot. And so we'd like to try and solve the bus bunching problem there. This would be an attempt to do that. It might end up being a frequency increase on the buses. It might end up being switching to headway scheduling where rather than the bus coming at, 6:42 and 7:03, it comes just every 10 minutes or something like that. It might be traffic signal changes. We're still working out exactly what it would be. But the point is, we're going to try and address the bus bunching on the 22F. The next project is the 16Y. Very similar situation, reliability improvements there. There's a lot of bus bunching on Columbia Pike buses in general, the 16Y among them, but not only. So we would like to try and either add buses or do headway scheduling or do some combination of things to reduce the bus bunching on the 16Y. If it works, we might then expand it in future years to other buses in Columbia Pike, but this would be kind of a pilot. The next project, South Glebe, West Glebe intersection improvements. This is the South Glebe, West Glebe intersection just south of Shirlington, and it would adjust to the geometry of the intersection. It would restripe it, change the lights, change the curb and gutter a little bit, basically so that cars that are turning from different sides on that intersection don't look like they're about to hit each other head on. There's a safety issue there. There's also a traffic congestion improvement situation there. Cars back up onto the off-ramp from I-395. So we think that project could score pretty well. The issue with that project is it's very expensive compared to everything else on our list. This project is $3 million, and nothing else on our list is even $1 million. That would be 20% of the funding, and there's no way we're doing it this October, much less next October. But this is the first year of this funding. We want to kind of try and poke things and see what's eligible and what's not. And in case the program runners, leaders are really interested in doing a road project, we want to have one. We think it's a long shot, but we want to put it in there. And finally, Pentagon Commuter Store expanded hours. Basically, the Pentagon Commuter Store is funded by an existing DRPT grant that's about to run out. When it runs out, we'll either have to close Pentagon Commuter Store or fund its operations using county money. If we could get some outside money to fund that, that would be wonderful. And so that's what this is. Those are our 6 projects. Some of the other projects that we considered but didn't make it on our recommended list to apply for. One, there was a proposal, there was a lot of robust discussion about doing something called advanced transit signal priority on the Metroway. Basically, signal priority technology is evolving very rapidly. It's getting better. The system that we might potentially apply for is different than the system that we have now. It's probably better. It probably would speed up buses by holding green lights longer, things like that. But it's so new that we don't really understand it. It's going to take us at least a year to wrap our heads around it. It's not been used anywhere in North America. There's no one that we can even legally procure it from right now. So we do think it's a really great idea. And we're very interested in it, maybe for a future round of this money. Israel. There are some admittedly very impressive looking results coming out of some BRT lines in Israel. So we are interested in this, but we don't want to apply for it right now. Please don't make us. Some other projects on our didn't make the cut list. The Crystal City to National Airport pedestrian bridge, which VDOT gave us money in the SIP for that. So we have what we need for that right now. We don't need to apply for that right now. We also had some other bus operations improvements, some other intersection improvements, some other commuter store operations, none of which we felt were as competitive as the ones that are on the list. So what you're seeing is basically the best from the menu that we had. The other thing is that at six applications, we're already kind of verging on too many. There's no way we're going to get 6 projects out of this. We'll probably get 2, but at some point, you just have to say no more. Our expectations are, as I said, we probably will get 2. This is going to be a very competitive round. The most competitive project type is probably going to end up being long-distance commuter buses from Prince William County, so that's probably going to be one of those that get funded. We don't have any of those. I guess we could. That would be weird. So my request to you is I would like your endorsement of these proposed submissions as I've described them to you, not necessarily as they're in the board report. And if you have any questions, I would be very happy to take them.
First, I just want to say I think that's possibly the best presentation we've ever gotten on a grant request.
I'm glad.
I think I've been on Transportation Commission now for 9 years, and this is possibly the first time here are the projects we considered but didn't put on the list actually made it into the initial presentation. I appreciate that first. I'm putting it on my calendar. Commissioner Calkins?
Quick question, is there any sort of jurisdictional spread that is part of this, or is it completely performance-based?
According to the legislation that guides it, it's performance-based. Now, realistically, politically speaking, NVTC and PRTC decide the projects, and NVTC and PRTC are made up out of politicians who are representatives of the jurisdictions from among them. They're very likely to come up with a spread. They don't have to award the projects in exact score order. They have to say why if they don't. I would be surprised if geographic equity and spreading is not a consideration, but it's not an official consideration.
Commissioner Lantelmi?
A couple of things. I agree with the Crystal City Transitway. That seems like a quick, easy win. But what was the experience with DC on the Rhode Island Avenue bus? Didn't they do that red also, and wasn't that an abject failure?
Rhode Island Avenue, in case you're not aware, they did a temporary bus lane on Rhode Island Avenue during a metro shutdown. They did not paint it red.
Okay.
And they had a lot of problems. It was basically ignored.
Okay, great.
There is one location in DC where they do have red paint on a bus lane. Does anybody know where it is? Chris is not allowed to answer.
Where?
It's on Georgia Avenue, near Howard University. There's 4 blocks of it. It's basically was their pilot a couple of years ago, and they're very happy with it. It's doing very well. So they're going to start using that everywhere they go. If you pay attention to DC projects this summer, there should be some bus lane projects with red paint in DC this summer.
Okay, and my second question is on the 3 bus lines. What is the ridership, average ridership on those 3? Do we know that? And do we have a idea or a goal for increased rider? Because the idea of this is increased ridership.
Yeah.
By improving these lines.
Yeah.
Do we have a goal for that increased ridership or some sort of projection or idea how much it's going to go up?
That is an excellent question, and I will have the answer, but I don't today. We do assign projects that could be described as bus priority projects by bus lines that could most benefit from them. The 16Y is obviously a very high ridership bus. I could look up the bus ridership of these lines. We have it up at my desk. I don't have it memorized. And we do have projections that are being generated for the ridership that these changes will make, but they're not complete yet.
Okay.
Commissioner Evans?
I have to ask about the transit signal priority. What is the system?
It's literally named Advanced Transit Signal Priority. And what it does differently than other signal priority systems is it recalibrates the lights after it's changed something. So buses, I had to ask this question too. Regular TSP, a bus comes along, it might hold a green light a little bit longer, or it might change a red a little bit sooner. It doesn't do things very often, because if it did, it would gum up the signal system. Now, there's also a thing called traffic signal preemption, which we don't use for buses, but ambulances and things like that use it. And they use it as the vehicle comes up, lights red, they switch it to green automatically. That also, if it's, if it's an ambulance, that's okay. If you did that a lot in a day, it would really gum up the system. This new technology, after every time it's used, it re-optimizes the timing of the light, basically starting over, so that your single gum up doesn't then filter down for the next hour. It seems like a great idea.
Thank you.
Commissioner Clement.
There is a bridge project right there. It is separate from what this would be. Correct.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Price.
Mr. Maloff, thank you for your presentation. Yes, it was very, very entertaining, so thank you for that. Can you, I guess, do you have any idea about how the other jurisdictions, what types of projects other jurisdictions are going to be submitting to this process?
Sort of.
Like, I'm just curious about Loudoun County. How would a project in Loudoun County benefit the corridor?
That's a good question. The geography is defined to basically be,
NVTCL, right, I get that.
so they're one of the jurisdictions. It might be hard for them to come up with a project that can legitimately benefit the toll-paying users.
Slightly.
Excuse me? Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you, I've not memorized all of Loudoun County's commuter bus routes. I guess they could have one that goes to Springfield and then goes up, I don't know. I think it's unlikely,
Really?
but
That way?
I'm not saying they have one. Man,
No,
I
I'm
don't
saying,
know.
but there's actually a serious question. Do you have an idea of what kind of projects are they considering?
I can tell you very confidently that there will be a number of commuter bus operations applications from everyone that thinks they have an eligible bus line. And that'll begin with Fairfax County Connector, and it'll go filtering down south. I'm sure, PRTC can't apply for things because they're the grantee, but jurisdictions can apply on their behalf. And, there are buses from Fredericksburg, there are buses from Spotsylvania. I would be shocked if we don't see a lot of those. I would suspect that Alexandria will apply for very similar things as we apply for.
Right.
There will probably be some series of Metro bus operations that are, very similar. We had a discussion with WMATA about the 22E, which is really similar to the 22F, but we would need Alexandria to apply for it because of the just slightly different way those two routes work. And so I know they were considering it. I don't know if they've made a decision on that. I would be surprised if Alexandria didn't come up with some sort of similar capital projects that we have. I would be surprised if Fairfax County didn't come up with some similar capital projects as we have. Beyond commuter bus operations, I have no real idea what we'll see from the outer jurisdictions. They could do park and rides. That would certainly be eligible. I would probably predict that we will see some of those, although park and rides are expensive to build, so that could be difficult to fund. Now, if you're just leasing parking spaces, then it's less expensive. So, one of the things about a new pot of money is it's going to be interesting to see what people apply for. Some of our applications we are proposing because we want to see what happens with them, like the road, the intersection. And I suspect there will be some of that prodding from other jurisdictions as well.
Commissioner Calkins.
Have there been any rumblings about micromobility programs to and from maybe like the slug lines, either for like Uber, Via, Lyft, and or a micromobility pilot from some of the southern jurisdictions?
Not that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean there can't be. I can expand on that comment if you want me to. But.
Commissioner Price.
Were there any projects, I guess, from when we did the I-66 commuter choice that were possible considerations for this? I mean, because the corridor is, again, we're closer to both.
Yeah, there are some places where we could make a case for something like that, particularly really close to the Potomac River, Roslyn, Pentagon area. We don't have any projects from any of the recent I-66 rounds of this funding that really you could say would make a good fit for 395. That doesn't mean that there couldn't hypothetically be something. Does that answer your question?
Any other?
If you'd like to know what projects we've applied for on I-66 recently, I have that. I will have to look at my phone to tell you the answer. But,
Okay. Any other questions? I'm going to move then that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county, actually, you asked for an endorsement, right?
I would like, however you want to do it is fine. However you want to recommend to the county board that they then endorse these.
Adopt the resolution authorizing Arlington County's applications to NVTC and PRTC for grant funding as outlined on this piece of paper, not our board report, which is apparently now inaccurate.
I'll second.
That's been seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's everybody. Thank you, Mr. Maliff. We'll take a 5-minute break as we tee up for the next item.
Where would you like us to?
Oh, you can, I'll move my stuff over there, but I need to find out what presentation. No, we got here.
Are you gonna be doing
Yeah.
operator?
Okay.
Ben,
Hey, guys.
do you want everything on here? Just want to drag everything on the desktop? It's fast. Will you need anything else for the presentation for reference or anything? Okay. Okay. Hope not. Good. You want to check that? Yeah, we can return that to.
Are you going first, Dennis?
No, you guys go first.
Our next item is item number 5. This is the Arlington Public School Education Center Reuse Project. This is an action item. I'll turn it over for the applicant to give you a briefing, and we also have one speaker for this item.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. We thank you for having us on the agenda this evening. This is the second time you're hearing this particular project. We did come to you in January for an information item. My name is Ben Bergen. I'm the Assistant Director of Design and Construction with Arlington Public Schools. We'll have a sort of a three-part presentation this evening. I'll give some introductory remarks. I'll hand it to Rob Schiesel with Grove Slade, who will go through some of the details and findings in the MMTA. And then Jim Spearman with Studio 27 Architecture will provide some further details about the site plan and the building design. So if we could move the slide forward, Robin, thank you. Just keep going to the project parameters slide. So this is a adaptive reuse of an existing facility. For those of you who may be aware, the Education Center and Planetarium directly adjacent to Washington Lee High School used to be the home to our central offices, which we vacated last year. We moved to Sequoia Plaza. And since then, the board had determined that we were going to change that facility from office use to school use. So as part of our project, our key parameters are on the screen here. This project was included in the last capital plan, capital improvement plan. The use initially is going to be to expand capacity of Washington Lee High School. So we'll be high school seats serving the Washington Lee community. We have a design capacity of a maximum of 600 students for the facility to open in 2021 with a maximum project cost of $37 million. So next slide. Thanks, Robin. We're currently in the middle of this timeline slide. We've had a fairly extensive community engagement process. It was a little truncated compared to many of our other projects given the scope of this particular project. We've had 6 joint BLPC, PFRC meetings. The most recent occurred in the 3rd of April, where they reviewed our use permit materials. The school board has seen the item a couple of times. They approved the educational specifications and also the schematic design. And it's important to note that we do have currently going on an interior demolition phase of the project, which kicked off a couple of weeks ago. And we are expected to be before the county board later this month, hence our presence here. And so through the use permit process, we initially submitted our application in March, and we had a number of discussions with county staff. We've made some revisions, certainly some revisions to the materials that you've seen in January, and we'll sort of show you both and talk about the changes that were made. Not shown on the slide, we did visit the E2C2 Commission in late April, and we're planning to go to the Planning Commission on Monday with a board hearing, as I mentioned, later this month. So that sort of summarizes my introduction. I'll now hand it off to Rob Schiesel to cover the MMTA.
Hey, good evening. Rob Schiesel from Grove Slade Associates. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a quick overview of the MMTA, kind of the basic parameters and recommendations. Our report, I think everyone has a copy of it. If you really want to go into details, we can do about that in questions. But I'm just going to go quickly over the main parts. As Ben just said, the campus we're talking about is kind of the Washington Lee High School campus that also consists of the former Education Center and also the planetarium. And for purposes, when I say campus, I'm also including the parking deck that's over I-66 in general when I use the word campus. So the heart of what we had to analyze in the MMTA was really just swapping out the office space that was in the Education Center use and expanding the total amount of students on site from somewhere around 2,400 to somewhere around 3,000, and the employees increasing by around 55. It depends a lot, but that's just scaling straight up from what they're currently on campus now based on the amount of students. So those are kind of the parameters we're working with. And just for reference, the parking on the site, There's a few surface lots. The surface lots that were around the education center shown here in orange, there's around 128 spots. They're all currently closed, used for storage. The lots and the other surface lots are shown in purple. Those are mostly visitor spots, around 50 of those. The main parking reservoir on campus is the garage, used mostly by the high school staff and students, and there's a little bit of, based on our data, a little bit of evidence that there's some non-campus users on there also. Just to summarize what's going on currently with the high school transportation-wise, buses enter General's Way, which is the east-west road that runs in between the high school and the education center there. The buses run one way from the Stafford to the Quincy side. Generally, all of it's accommodated at arrival. There's a little bit of spill back up towards 15th Street. The student drop-off mostly during arrival occurs right around the front door at Washington Lee. It doesn't all fit in that little semicircular drive that you see there. In fact, a lot of it occurs, on 13th, on Stafford, and other places close to it. It's around 20 to 25 minutes of activity, and it kind of is over relatively quickly. There are crowds of pedestrians along 13th Street, a lot of it from being dropped off on 13th Street a block or two away as they walk in. There's also platoons coming up from the south as they cross. They come in platoons because they're crossing when they get the walk sign as they come over Washington Boulevard and make their way up. You also see some of this activity all around the campus, on the Quincy side, on the Washington Boulevard side. Some parents drop off in the visitor parking. Some parents just, it all kind of spreads out. When you take anything that's over 2,000 students, there's always a little bit kind of surrounding everywhere. A little bit of activity here and there. Dismissal, a little bit similar. Buses need more room at dismissal to queue up. They actually all don't fit on General's Way, so there's a few that use Stafford right now. The other major thing at dismissal is that cars and riders have to match up, unlike at arrival when it's just, you just drop off your kid as you arrive. When you're picking up, you have to match. So it takes up a little bit more room. There's a lot of parents just kind of park on street. They do not fit in that semicircular drive. There's a road closure right around 13th that helps control all this chaos. What that means is it's a little bit tough to come in from the north. It's a little bit congested over there. And these are a lot of the thoughts about how all this works went into a lot about how we sculpted the MMTA recommendations and what we kind of focused our analysis on. Before I go into a summary of those recommendations, just a little bit of flashback to the January meeting and the design that we presented. So we had showed kind of our draft recommendations and how we wanted to handle the expanded traffic from the campus, what the basically 25% increase in students would mean and what we would want to, how we would want to accommodate that. And we showed a reopened parking lot around the education center, the one I previously just said was closed, and we showed some new bus and arrival dismissal areas for student pickup and drop-off, basically expanding upon giving more of these resources to the campus so that it's not all concentrated where it is currently right now. A simultaneous goal was that, and not just expanding upon the campus resources, if in the long term, if the school ever wanted to go in an independent direction, we wanted to have a separate secondary areas for bus pickup drop-off so that it could be used if it ever switched to secondary instead of in concert with the high school. Some of the main feedback we got in January, generally the overall strategy seemed like it was going in the right direction, but there's some feedback on what our recommendations on Quincy Street. We had recommended some arrival dismissal pickup drop-off near the front door because that's generally where parents want to go. There was a little bit of pros and cons to that, and one of the ones that was brought up last time was potential conflicts with bicycle lanes and general traffic on North Quincy Street. That was the main thing that really, transportation-wise, made to a bunch of changes from what you saw in January. After that, though, in conversation with the county staff also indicated that their long-term plans for North Quincy Street may not work with that, and they made the recommendation to APS to not assume that that activity could happen on North Quincy Street. So I'll go back to the summary of the MMTA findings. So just starting with vehicular parking, we're expecting it to increase around 100 spots. The demand expected to increase to 100. Based on our reviews of what the available supply is, that can be accommodated in what's already on site. And in fact, we don't have to reopen all the spaces that are currently closed. So we made the recommendation, out of the 128, you only need 82 back. And then you can see in the design plans how the design team kind of took that recommendation and modified the parking lot a little bit. Bicycle parking, generally expecting it to increase by 25%. Hopefully, not just more of the student growth. In the future, we'll have more people, more students cycling. There wasn't a concern there about the amount of parking on the campus, but the quality and the proximity to future front doors and where it's going to be. And so, working with the design team, we actually came up with the 3 new parking locations that are going to be part of this project. You'll see those in a bit more detail when we get into the design. Traffic operations, long story short, the MMTA doesn't have any traffic operations-based mitigation measures. Our future traffic models weren't that much different than existing. The swapping an office building for school wasn't that huge of a difference. There's a little bit of notice in the morning, but not enough that really swayed us into making any traffic operations recommendations directly related to this project. So arrival and dismissal, if you expect the amount of activity that's going to increase there by 25%, we weren't satisfied with saying it could all happen where it does right now in that little chaotic area, plus we wanted to have a secondary area in case it needed to be independent. So we recommended additional pickup, drop-off, arrival areas, additional room for bus loading and unloading. We might not need all of that, but we thought it was important to expand upon that so that we don't just add to the current little dance of chaos that happens during arrival and dismissal on the Stafford side. Those are kind of outlined. What is mostly changed since January is the location of those pickup drop-off areas. Instead of a secondary one, we actually now have 2 that are a little bit further away, trying to bracket the campus. So if you look at it overall, there's now 3 areas that are going to be official. So it's part of a strategy, also with its pros and cons, but it's also a strategy that represents trying to balance all the needs of not just the campus, but with the county's goals for Quincy Street. Pedestrian-wise, the total number of pedestrians and sidewalk width and facilities were fine, but when we went through crossings, not just walking down the street on sidewalks, but crossings, we did highlight the efficiency along Quincy Street, right near the Education Center. It's kind of a long gap between signalized intersections. There's not a lot of places, and the MMTA goes into detail about how we ended up recommending the installation of a rectangular rapid flash beacon at 14th Street to help increase the driver compliance rate. We were able to, we took our traffic data with video cameras, and we actually were able to go down, look at the cameras, see how long people had to wait for gaps, looked at driver compliance rate, looked at all the research on the different ways, and matched it up that this is the solution to help achieve the goals we were looking for there. So that's the quick hits of the MMTA. The report that goes into much more detail, I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but in the interest of time, we're just going to go over some of the design and the principles and the actual design of the project.
Thank you, Rob. I'm Jim Spearman with I'm Jim Spearman with Studio 27 Architecture, and we'll just walk through the proposed use permit design. We always start design with design principles. We think it's important to acknowledge the Arlington County Principles of Civic Design, which may vary in their priority for each project, but nonetheless, these 4 categories are pretty important: civic values, siting and orientation, building form, and building details and materials. And this is a particularly interesting application of these principles as an adaptive reuse project. Arlington Public Schools' strategic plan sets up a series of goals. There are five key goals that everything that APS is doing is related to. And that offers a way for us to have design principles for the project that relate to the strategic plan. These are things that are important for a high-performance learning environments, which you see is a design principle in itself, but the other things you see are supporting that. On the existing campus, as you know, we have the existing Washington Lee High School, the planetarium, the APS Ed Center. The Buck site, which comes up from time to time, is across North Quincy from this campus. And then the north side of the campus, the way we've been thinking about the campus, it really includes the 66 parking deck and goes all the way up to 15th Street. This is just as Rob has already narrated, we had a site design that you all saw at the January 10th Transportation Commission meeting, and we've gotten some feedback since then. And so you've already what we've heard from the stakeholders. Yep. And let's keep going to the actual revised site design. So this is based on the findings and recommendations from the MMTA. And these notes on this overhead photo annotate both some existing facilities as well as the new proposed facilities. And so tying back into what Rob was mentioning about pickup and drop-off, the two yellow bars that you see at the north and south sides of the campus are new dispersed pickup and drop-off areas on 15th Street and Washington Boulevard. That relates to the existing Stafford Street pickup and drop-off, which you see on the left hand of the page. We have 3 bicycle parking locations. First in the new bike parking in the garage, actually inside the garage, it's Class 2 or outdoor and covered bicycle parking, about 32 bicycle spaces there. We have new bicycle parking immediately adjacent to North Quincy. It's class 3, it's uncovered, it's also 32 bicycles. And then we also have 8 bikes of capacity in a Class 1 bike parking location, a secure indoor facility there. We're not proposing to change the existing visitor parking or the existing metered parking on North Quincy. And I think just in conclusion, we still have the new bus drop-off just between the planetarium and North Quincy. Just zooming into the Ed Center area a little bit, what you'll see here is one of the key features for an internal campus site design is we are proposing a new ramp between the Ed Center and W&L, and it's aligned to a major interior circulation path inside the W&L building, and it connects directly the front of the Ed Center as we're renovating it. There are a few other things like do not enter signs along General's Way. It's two-way from North Quincy to that crossing, and so it switches from two-way to one-way there. In detail, the bicycle parking, these are enlarged drawings of the 3 different bike facilities that we have. On the left is the Class 1 that's inside. This is accessed from the ground level. One of the interesting things about the Ed Center is that there's a ground level and a first floor level, and they're both at grade. And so the first floor is at grade with the planetarium, and the ground floor is at grade with the north parking lot. And so the Class 1 bike parking comes in off the north parking lot. The Class 2 is there in the existing parking garage, and Class 3 is the one that's adjacent to North Quincy Street. So you can see what we're doing there is we're repurposing some existing parking spaces, existing vehicle parking spaces for bicycle parking. Transportation demand management is a hugely important aspect of this, and APS has a robust TDM program, as you know, implemented division-wide, and the Ed Center building is going to be fully integrated with the existing program. The APS Director of Multimodal Transportation and Safe Routes to School Coordinator regularly work collaboratively with Arlington Transportation Partners, DES staff, school staff, and community members to maximize the use of non-single occupant vehicle transportation to and from the school. The standard APS use permit condition number 16 is for a transportation management plan, outlines specific expectations, including a development of a comprehensive transportation management plan, the appointment of a school transportation coordinator, publication and distribution of transportation information, and routine performance monitoring to evaluate progress toward target goals and recommendations for improvement. Here you'll see just a simple image of the floor plans of the building. When we come before commissions, we often focus on the public facilities. So you'll see in floor plan number 1, the lighter red color is the commons. If we can go to the next slide, we'll see that in a little bit more detail. So you see the main entry at the bottom of the slide, the commons area, that's the area we expect to be available for public meetings and that sort of thing. The orange color on this plan is the administrative offices, and the darker red or pink colors are areas that support the commons area. So we just want to share a few images of the exterior of the building as it will be renovated. It looks very, very similar to the way that it is now. We try the next one. since we don't have time to play the game of spot the difference, we'll tell you that what we're doing is we're adding operable windows all around the school to facilitate natural ventilation for high-performance learning environments. This is the ramp going back to W&L. And this is the roof terrace that faces the north parking lot. And that's the north facade of the building. And that's our presentation, and we'd welcome questions.
The staff have a presentation to add? Great.
Good evening. I'm Dennis Sellen with DES Transportation Division. This project is, as you've heard, it's the amended application for use permit for the Education Center, which is an amendment to a project that was originally approved by the County Board in 2005. The project is almost entirely within the Ballston, Virginia Square Civic Association. It lies approximately 0.6 of a mile northeast of the Ballston Metro Station and approximately 0.6 of a mile northwest of the Virginia Square Civic Metro Station. The existing campus is outlined in blue. This is the W&L campus, and the site itself is outlined in red. The previous use permit was approved in May of 2005. That was for the construction of the expanded, what we know as the new W&L High School, and this is, of course, an amendment to that application. This is pretty much a summary of what you've just heard from APS. This is a conversion of the Education Center, approximately 55,000 square feet with a capacity of up to 600 students, a pedestrian and accessible connection to the existing high school, the new bus drop-off and pickups site, which will have a capacity of 5 buses, on-site bicycle parking, about 64 outdoor spaces, about 8 indoor bicycle parking spaces, off-site parent pickup and drop-off, that will be about 24 to 31 spaces. Those will be located near the campus and within walking distance. And then rectangular rapid flashing beacons to be placed by APS at the intersection of 14th Street North and North Quincy Street. The applicant is requesting 2 modifications to the zoning ordinance. I'll address these in reverse order. The first is for modification of building height and setback regulations. The second is a modification of parking regulations. According to the zoning requirement, the applicant is required to provide 751 parking spaces, and you can see the requirements outlined as per the ordinance on the left-hand side. And those are for both for classroom space as well as for assembly space. And the applicant is proposing, the board report states 508. I believe they actually are proposing 514 spaces. You will see within the MMTA that a demand analysis for parking was performed by the transportation consultant, and that determined a daily demand of approximately 517 vehicles at the site. And when the new Education Center building is opened, there will be about 89 unrestricted and 70 time-restricted, on-street parking spaces that will be available in the near vicinity of the high school campus, and that brings the total available parking supply to approximately 673 parking spaces on or near the the W&L campus. I should back up a little bit. Those 514 spaces include 376 in the garage that will be available to all staff and students, 88 in the surface parking lot immediately adjacent to the Education Center building, 36 visitor spaces in the surface parking lot, and 14 spaces in the surface parking lot on North Stafford Street. The county staff concurs with APS that given the proposed supply of parking, there will be sufficient parking both on-site and nearby on-street to satisfy the demand in the future, and we believe that the request for a parking modification is thereby justified. This project is also in conformance with MTP policies. There's 3 major policies that this project aligns with, which is integration of transportation with land use, supporting design and operation of complete streets, and managing travel demand with transportation system. The proposal includes TDM measures that include the use and encourage the use of alternative travel modes to reduce the demand for parking. And APS has also requested the modification to reduce the amount of required on-site parking spaces. Several of the use permit conditions are directly address DES, and those are the civil engineering conditions, such as the installation of the pedestrian safety device, the outdoor bicycle parking facilities, the condition number 14 on parking, condition 15, which addresses the bicycle storage, the class 1 bike storage facilities, condition 16, which is TDM, and condition 18, which is to develop pickup and drop-off procedures as well as to monitor them. The applicant has addressed the pickup and drop-off procedures and the locations that they will be using on the south side of 15th Street South, directly north of the campus. There are approximately 12 to 19 spaces between North Stafford Street and North Quincy Street. And on the north side of Washington Boulevard, there are 12 spaces that will be available during arrival and dismissal periods for dropping off and picking up students. Both of these locations are on the public right-of-way, and both are accessible on foot to the Education Center building. The spaces on 15th Street North do not have any current restrictions on parking availability, and the spaces on Washington Boulevard are currently metered for parking during, I believe, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. In both cases, the county staff would likely place signs in the area that would permit drop-off and pickup activities during the specified periods of the school days, with the normal parking activities to be permitted at other times. And we would work out those details in the parking management plan. North Quincy Street was a topic of discussion throughout the PFRC and BLPC process. This is a slide which shows the existing conditions on North Quincy Street, approximately in the location of the Education Center. And North Quincy Street has a crossing distance of approximately 41 to 42 feet at 14th Street North, which was the area of a lot of discussion during the PFRC process. The crossing distance does vary up to about 47 feet, but the configuration is generally that it is a single lane in each direction with parking lanes on both sides. And along portions of the street, there's a 5-foot bike lane. In some places, specifically at the entrance to the Buck site and at Washington Boulevard, there's a left turn lane. There are currently 41 multi-meter parking spaces on the west side of North Quincy Street, which is the side at the W&L Education Center campus. between I-66 and Washington Boulevard. On the east side of Quincy Street, there are 9 zoned parking spaces restricted for residents between Washington Boulevard and 13th Street. And there's 4 unrestricted parking spaces just north of 13th Street North. The difficulties of North Quincy Street are that it is a very frequently traveled street. It's an arterial. There are about 12,000 vehicles a day. The traffic is heavy in both directions at all times of the day, which leaves few gaps for traffic from the side streets attempting to make turns, especially left-hand turns onto North Quincy Street. The side streets have poor levels of traffic surface, and those levels of service will become slightly worse as a result of the project. One of the things that we did notice in reviewing the traffic and transportation analysis for the project was that the percentage of the teenagers, the students using bicycling to and from W&L rivals or exceeds the number who are picked up and drop off by their parents. It's as high as 29%, and it's among the highest for schools in the county. The walk numbers and the percentages are not as high. It's about 2 to 7% of W&L students who walk to school. For the Quincy 14th Street intersection, the number of pedestrians crossing North Quincy Street are about 30 per hour at the morning bell, 39 per hour at the afternoon school bell, and 17 per hour in the evening commuter period. And these numbers could increase about 20 to 25% with the renovated Ed Center building. While the county ultimately recommended that North Quincy Street was not a good candidate for any pickup and drop-off activities related to this APS project, because of the potential for conflicts, especially between teenagers entering or exiting their parents' cars and people trying to cross the street or people trying to bicycle along North Quincy Street, we do believe that this segment of North Quincy Street should be examined for improvements to multimodal connectivity and safety. This summer, the county has an opportunity through its repaving program to restripe the street, roughly the segment that's shown in this slide, to provide for safer facilities for all modes and to enhance the multimodal connectivity of this north-south corridor. This is a broader section of North Quincy Street, roughly showing the area from Lee Highway to about Glebe Road. And this shows some of the efforts that we've taken, the county has taken over the past 2 years along this corridor to implement some better pedestrian and bicycle facilities through repaving opportunities. And this small segment shown in yellow dashed lines of North Quincy Street is one of the last portions which does need some better marking delineation and improved multimodal facilities. So for the staff recommendation at this point, the county staff is recommending we do support the subject use permit amendment to convert the education center from school administrative office use to school instructional use. The project generally complies with the county's zoning ordinance, the GLUP, and all applicable aspects of the comprehensive plan, including the MTP and other adopted county policies. The project has been identified in the Arlington School Board's adopted CIP as a priority for expanding high school capacity as the demand for student seats continues to grow in the county. The adaptive reuse of an existing building already located on a site zone for school use significantly reduces the cost of otherwise designing and constructing a new facility to accommodate capacity needs and reduces the amount of time it would take to construct a new facility. The zoning ordinance modification for building height is for a condition of the existing building, which the county board has the right to modify, and the modification for parking is justified given the details outlined in the MMTA and in the staff report. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the use permit amendment with modifications to the zoning ordinance requirements for height and parking and subject to the conditions set forth in this report. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Best, I believe we have a speaker.
We do have a speaker. It's Collier Cook from the Ballston, Virginia Square Civic Association.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Collier Cove from Boston, Virginia Square. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. We have been an active participant as part of this process through the BLPC and the PFRC groups. We as a neighborhood were supportive of the failed historic district for this building, so we are happy that it's adaptively being reused. We are looking forward to keeping the building around and having a new life. Just like to talk through some of the thoughts and concerns we have at this point. First, sort of a win for us was the student pickup and drop off on Quincy. When it was proposed, we pushed back quite hard, and so we're happy to see this new dispersed locations on 15th and Washington Boulevard. Having said that, we do realize that there's going to be spots literally right in front of the building that people will want to use, so we are going to encourage APS to have a strong communications plan to encourage parents from avoiding drop-offs on Quincy. On 15th Street, there was some discussion on whether it should be that the spots should be a little further west than they are, than right up against Quincy. We actually probably are going to see folks using that upper deck as a drop-off area, that sort of eastern portion of the upper level of the parking deck is sort of open use, and so we would expect people to sort of use that as a informal, if it's not formal, drop-off area. Another thing is communications, sort of signage and wayfinding. We think that, especially for the normal day-to-day school use, I think people will understand the patterns. But this school is obviously used a lot at night on weekends, and there's a lot of folks coming here not knowing about, there's a gigantic parking garage on the backside of the facility, and they start parking within the neighborhood. So we would request some sort of signage program to help folks navigate sort of this district, this campus, to better find the facilities that are available to them. Also, at one point, and I'm not sure if it's still there, there was a proposal for bus drop-offs right next to the planetarium, and our representatives were requesting if that could be accommodated in other places. It was suggested in the MMTA that that might not be required to be used at that point. With regards to the crossing of Quincy at 14th Street, we appreciate the consideration for some sort of traffic device there. The schools and staff have proposed a RFB, but as we understand, and as it was told to us, that the hawk signal would be a bit more effective, or it has been determined to be more effective at compliance, and so we would appreciate if that could be considered. And the last thing is, again, we were sort of disheartened. It wasn't really touched on tonight, but there was a proposed multi-use court to be put in at one point in that, and sort of a courtyard, and we are disappointed that's not currently in there. We'd like to continue to the county or in schools to be able to see if we can find space somewhere on this campus for more active uses rather than just parking. So I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
And that concludes our speakers for this item.
All right. Thank you very much to the applicant for their presentation, and to staff for theirs, and Mr. Cook for coming out to speak. Who has questions? Commissioner Lantelmi.
Well, one, I first want to commend you for finally getting some bicycle parking that's under something, so it's sheltered a bit. We've been asking for this for schools for quite a long time, and getting it here is a nice, we're moving in that direction. I'd like to see more of that, even on this site, but it's definitely, thank you for doing that. My main question, though, actually goes to the parking. I'm getting different numbers all over the place, and I'm not sure what the real number is for the amount of parking. There's 508, there's 514, and then on page 33, there's 495 as a minimum. So which number are we really using for parking? Is it really a range, or do we actually have a number that's going to be settled on?
I'll start with that and ask anybody else to join in. So the 514 spaces comes from what we currently show on our plans. The 500, what was the other, 508, I believe, is the minimum recommended in the MMTA. And so what we sort of proposed in our application letter is for the county board to sort of accept a 508 number, knowing that as we're only at schematic design development, knowing that we wanted a little more flexibility if a couple of those spaces had to be occupied due to like fire access or things of that sort as the design develops. And I believe the 495 space is what the county staff is recommending the county board modify our parking requirement to. Is that correct, Dennis?
That's a pretty good assessment, yes.
Okay,
So we could justify as low as 495, and that gives APS and the board some flexibility should there be any changes in the amount of parking that ultimately gets provided, so that their MMTA justifies as low as 495. So I think you will see the conditions will state a minimum of 495, and then their application is for 508. And then what they're actually providing is 514, and I do apologize for these numbers. But actually, I think the difference is 2% in the difference of these numbers.
Okay, so when Transportation Commission, when Planning Commission, when the county board, should they go ahead and vote to recommend and approve this, the only real number that will be anywhere will be minimum of 495 spaces.
That's correct.
Okay, so really, that's the number we should then be focusing on.
Yes, because that is the condition in the use permit.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure that was clarified.
Commissioner Calkins.
I have a follow-up question I staffed or attended on behalf of Transportation Commission to the multitude of meetings. I am not quite sure what's happening with the back parking lot that was at one time going to be the active play space. Is that going to be maintained as parking? Is that going to be chained off? What is the anticipated use of that area now that APS has said that they don't want the active use of the asphalt in the back parking lot?
So the back parking lot will by and large be similar to what it was when APS occupied the building as an office use. It will return to the use as a parking lot. There's a little bit of differences there. We had to modify a few of the spaces to accommodate fire access required by the fire department, but by and large, it's going to be very similar to when APS was using the facility previously.
Both from a community and transportation perspective, I do find that disappointing. That's a lot of asphalt being used for parking in an area that has significant multimodal opportunities. I know at the meetings, the community as a whole expressed a lot of desire to even just see that be passive use blacktop. And I don't know if as Transportation Commission, we want to make a reference to encouraging long-term a rethink about how that sit base can be used if it's not needed as parking.
I'm sure it'll come up at Planning Commission.
Other commission questions? I think I'm basing this entirely on one arrow on one map, but is the plan for the RRFB at 14th and Quincy that it be on the south side of 14th Street?
The plan would be on both crosswalks.
I assume not multiple flashing.
No.
Side, wow.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you don't want cars trapped in the middle. Yes. Yes, yes. Both crosswalks that cross Quincy would be marked.
Great, glad to hear it.
So there'd be 4 buttons.
So that's my next question.
Yes.
Love RRFBs. I'm glad we're expanding their use in the county. I understand why we don't want to put hawks at intersections. My biggest issue is that I have not yet seen us install an RRFB in Arlington County that is functional for a bicycle to use to cross as well as easily as it is for the pedestrians. We have RRFBs on the 9th Street Bike Boulevard near Columbia Pike that, like, literally cannot get to on a bicycle without getting off and, like, crossing 9th Street and, like, jumping a curb with your bike just to hit the button to make the lights flash. It seems like RRFBs are the way we're going to make it easier to cross these major arterials without putting actual full traffic signals at these side streets. If that's the way we're going, I feel like we have got to come up with a design solution that makes this work for bikes.
I actually used the Shirlington one today. It worked okay.
Okay, literally, that one's mid-block, and so it works a little easier. But somebody like riding on 14th Street without an additional button facing the street or passive detection that points at the street or something, I'm just afraid the RRFB is not useful for instance, a student riding north on Quincy in the bike lane who then needs to cross Quincy at 14th to actually get into the Ed Center school. So I really encourage county staff and the applicant, especially county staff, because this is a county-wide problem, not just a here problem, to figure out a way to make this work going forward. If staff or the applicant has a response to that, great. If not, I totally understand. Commissioner Clement?
Excellent project. But I also share Commissioner Calkin's concerns about the fact that there's so much hardtop left on that lot. And so it seems to me, however, that if 495 spaces is the minimum, that lot, that APS has no choice but to use that lot for parking. So I want to know how hard and fast that 495 number is.
Well, it's a reduction from the zoning requirement of 751. So it's based on our judgment and also the observations that were taken by the traffic consultant based on observations from daily use. And that was 517 vehicles. And this school, I will say, and Rob may want to chime in, but does have a very good, compared to other schools in APS district, a very good mode share in terms of use of alternative transportation modes. Also, I think its location benefits it as well, but it does have a high bike, a high walk. This is for students and staff, a high transit share. So. And unfortunately, in the 2012 changes that were made, high schools did not benefit from some of the reductions that were made for the other types of schools. So high schools are still somewhat burdened by having to provide a lot more parking than elementary and middle schools. So I do think the numbers are still somewhat flexible. But the observations were that there's still a large number of vehicles that do come to campus on a daily basis.
Commissioner Price?
Thank you for everyone's presentation. Just a quick question. Prior to the construction, how much parking existed on site, and I guess at peak, how much was capacity? How many parking spots were filled or used, I guess is the term?
Defined before construction.
Before all this is happening, you took out parking. How much existed on site and at peak capacity or at the peak hour? How much is being used?
The slide I had up earlier, that's been the parking. The 128 spots that are currently closed were just open. When we did our parking counts, the lot was already closed. So I don't have a great answer for when it was still open. There was a monitoring study that was done a few years ago, but I don't have it with me that had a number. When we did our counts, overall, I believe, between all the facilities on site, including the garage, it was over 90%. It was pretty well occupied.
Read somewhere it was at peak, was about a 30-minute window. There was about 92% of all parking spots were being used.
Yeah, and I remember looking at, like, if we had changed the denominator and added those 128 back in, that was similar to what, we were getting within 5 to 10% of what that other monitoring report had, which was around 70 to 75% at peak. So it seems that it was similar amount full, but the main difference was the loss of those spaces that were closed. I don't know if that makes sense.
It just seems that this project is still overparked. If you ask, from my perspective, you're still way overparked.
I have a couple questions about the MMTA. As part of this transportation study, do we do pedestrian counts at the intersections?
Yes.
Are they in here someplace?
In the MMTA? No, they would be in the count sheets in the back, and we actually, we've not believe it or not, as long as the report is not everything we've worked on and studied in our office is in the report, no.
So there's like an appendix that's just not in the printed.
Well, yeah. Believe it or not, the actual amount of pedestrians that cross the street didn't come up in any of our analysis and stuff. We looked at it a few times when we were looking at investigating, but we have to we trim it down to everything that's needed to support our recommendations. It's just one of the things that's not in there.
Understood. And do we do bike counts as part of it?
Yes, we do full multimodal counts at all the spots.
So, because one of my big questions about this campus is that big bike commute split, that 20% or 23% or whatever of people who are biking to the campus, or at least students who are biking to the campus. Like, what are they riding on to get there? Are they on Quincy? Are they on Stafford? Are they coming down the trail?
We don't have solid data on that. I mean, we can look through. I mean, the counts during arrival and dismissal on Quincy are not that high on the bike path, but that's just how many people are just going up and down it. But that didn't really factor as much into our how we kind of viewed it. Just when I was out there walking the campus, when it's arrival dismissal, almost all on Stafford. They're all heading to the parking. I saw some on the Quincy side, but a lot of them at that point were cutting through the campus to get to where they were going. So outside the campus boundary, a block or two away, I'm not exactly sure, but at dismissal, when the bike field, like 60 to 70 bikes leave those racks within a 10-minute period. They almost all were going north on Stafford, south or Stafford, or west on 13th.
Right. But who knows how much that's driven by the fact that that's where all of the parking is on Stafford.
Possibly. I mean, that's one of the reasons, one of the reasons we wanted to locate some parking on the other side of the campus.
Makes sense. Thank you. Any other commission question? Commissioner Price?
In the plan, we have Class 1 bike parking, Class 2, Class 3. The Class 1 is inside. Is that, I guess, going to be reserved for teachers, and they'll have shower facilities and such?
Class 1 is designated for commuters. I believe they're indoor secured, so that it has secure access and with lockers. There are not showers at that facility, but there are showers at the pool. So commuters will have access to showers on campus.
And for a bicyclist, or for the students to gain access to the covered bike parking in the parking deck, are they just going to have to weave through traffic that are parking in the parking lot to gain access to that, or is there going to be some sort of separate entrance? This was not clear from reviewing.
Yeah. walking around that garage, you'd understand it's kind of tough to lay out and map it out.
It's terrible, actually.
Yeah, and it's actually not as close to the Ed Center as it is, just based on the stairs and switchbacks and how the grade's made up. It's actually not as proximate as it appears on the bird's eye view. The easiest way a cyclist would get there would be just to enter like as if there were a vehicle on 15th and come up. It would be difficult to like walk your bike to that spot from one of the ped paths. I would suspect most would enter at the driveway as if they were parking there as a car.
Commissioner Calkins.
The pickup drop-off zone on Washington Boulevard still gives me a little bit of pause, just because I know it is the off-peak direction. But people who do pickup drop-off are notorious for not pulling all the way into a pickup drop-off zone. And you're at a intersection or very close to an intersection at the location. I was wondering if county staff is completely comfortable with this as a designated pickup drop-off zone.
Yes, we have discussed this, and you're correct that the traffic on Washington Boulevard is very directional, meaning that it is substantially eastbound in the mornings, and there's very light westbound traffic in the mornings for, especially for drop-off. And so that we perceive that traffic would be quite light, and that we do not perceive that there would be conflicts, especially compared to the previous option, which was Quincy Street.
That makes sense. I guess the fact that there's not traffic gives me concern too, because that means if you get a green as you're approaching Washington Boulevard, you keep carrying your speed, and people speed on Washington Boulevard a lot, and it takes one parent who doesn't pull all the way into the pickup drop-off zone to get clipped by someone who's come out of that intersection too quickly to create a situation that has, bad outcomes. Do we have other pickup drop-off zones on four-lane roadways with this level of speed limit in the county?
It's a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, so yes, I believe that we do, and I don't think that we have this type of a facility where we do not have as many off-street options. I think this is one of the difficulties of this site, that we were really looking for where can we do pickup and drop-off. And this is why we came up with, like, where is the best non-bad option?
I appreciate that. I just live very close to the school, and I can attest to people go much faster than 30 miles per hour when they have the opportunity on Washington Boulevard. And it's concerning. I think I would personally be comfortable with removing Washington Boulevard as an encouraged pickup drop-off location and just having 15th Street and the existing pickup drop-off. And if people desire to pick up and drop off at Washington Boulevard and do so without the county's endorsement, so be it. But to say that we're encouraging people to use Washington Boulevard does concern me a little bit, because it is a 4-lane, undivided, higher speed roadway.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Anybody else? I appreciate moving pickup and drop-off off Quincy, but given that, based on the parking study, it looks like those parking spaces are basically never used during pickup and drop-off times anyway, is there concern that people are just going to pick up and drop off there anyway because the parking spaces are open?
Yes. In short, yes. We probably went over 8 to 10 different pickup drop-off ideas, and we sketched up at least 3 to the level you've seen tonight. And there's pros and cons to each of them. The one we came to you with January, there's different philosophies. Parents are going to come to a front door of a school like moths go to a flame. So you have 2 different ways. You can either try to anticipate it and try to control it at the point, or you can try to prohibit it and push it to areas where you'd rather have it. Both of those ideas come with pros and cons. One of the cons of the peripheral idea we have is that people do what you don't want them to do anyway. We have discussed with the county staff, ways we might be able to change how the configurations are on North Quincy Street, before the school opens, with some of the things Dennis was talking about, the plans. And so we've had discussions there, we're just talking about what I think the parents may do and different ways we might be able to prevent it, whether it's just removing the parking or putting physical separation there, or several other things that could happen.
Commissioner Brose.
Yeah, I understand Commissioner Calkins' concerns about that crossroad, but I actually spent some time in the early mornings at that time, and the way the road is configured and the parking spaces are there, which I assume they would utilize, I just don't have the same concerns. The road actually widens a little bit there. So while there are definitely always potential for stopped cars and accidents, I think that particular location, just north or west of the intersection at Quincy and Washington Boulevard, is actually not a bad suggestion for having drop-offs. So I actually think that's okay.
Commissioner Evans.
Is there associated signage with those recommended pickup and drop-off areas?
I mean, the final signage doesn't get assembled to later plans. We have had talks about it. County staff will get the final say, but there's currently signage there's a similar functionality already on Stafford, and there's signage there that works, and that's kind of the starting off point, I think. But I think there were photos of those in some of the presentations or the materials we've had.
Yeah, there will be a parking management plan that's developed after the project's approved, and it's possible that the meters could be removed, but it's more likely that the meters on Washington Boulevard would remain with some signage stating no parking during this period and this period. And similarly for 15th Street, the restrictions, the non-restrictions would remain with the exception of the pickup and drop-off period, but that's to be determined later.
I think it's a good project. My only concern is the pickup and drop-off. I really think pickup and drop-off on Quincy was the right choice. We just needed to actually redesign Quincy to make it safe and deal with those conflicts. I'm afraid just telling people to go do pickup and drop-off somewhere else isn't going to work. We're just going to get those same conflicts we would have had if we'd said do pickup and drop-off on Quincy, but without even the green paint that was originally proposed. But them's the brakes, right? I move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board approve the subject use permit amendment for the conversion of the education center from administrative office to school use with the design capacity of up to 600 students and with modifications to parking and height subject to the proposed conditions of this staff report. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next item is item number 6, the personal mobility pilot. Jim Larson is here to give you a quick overview, and this is an action item.
Well, we've seen each other a few times, and I'll keep it brief tonight, but we wanted to keep you in the loop and ask for your endorsement. We want to, as you saw from the memo I sent, we want to extend the extension through October. We originally could have done it through September, but when you look at the whole evaluation process, which we think is very important, and by the way, many of you have been at some of the things that I've been at and given input to this process. So what we're asking the county board, and hoping you'll endorse, extend it for 4 months in order to have the warm weather data when they're going to be out there versus the winter data we currently have. Give us a lot more time for analysis, and I'll give you a couple of ideas what we're going to be doing during that time. And then, of course, the county manager to amend the memorandum of agreement to extend it, and some additional permit fees from those organizations. I suspect most of them will stay, because that's probably their busiest potential time as well. We've already talked to them about that at our monthly meeting, and I believe that they'll go that direction. I wrote a couple things at the bottom without giving you all the detail. I expect we're going to be back to you one or two times more before the October board meeting. But a lot of comments, concerns, and you've seen and heard some of those before. So far, about 600 emails containing 1,200 complaints, 80 compliments on the project. And then we get the monthly report. We're up to like almost 300,000 trips in Arlington since the launch of the project, and about 280,000 miles traveled. It's an interesting revelation. Frankly, it's a little more than I thought we would see, but then we also didn't know who was going to be here promoting what's going on. But particularly because I've heard this from you before, and I've heard it at some meetings, I just want to mention to you a few of the highlights of what will be analyzed and why we're taking our time with that. Extent of parking impacts that are detrimental to pedestrian, bike, or vehicle safety and circulation. Number and types of breaches by vendor and resolution. Sufficiency of communications provided by operators to their customers and the wider community. Acceptability of fleet size. Sufficiency of distribution of services across the community. That's an important one, by the way. Usage patterns. Also comparison of crash rates to other transport modes. And I think it was one or more of you have mentioned that to me, yes. And trip-making characteristics of ridership, including mode replacement. That's an important one. As you know, we've talked about, is this the first mile, last mile? Is it causing somebody not to take transit? You know, there's some things we're not sure how much we're going to get to the bottom of that, but we're definitely concerned about that. High use areas and routes within the county, and general community response over the course of the demonstration, which of course there's been a lot already, and there will be more. So summary analysis will inform us a staff recommendation to the county board on whether to make the demonstration project permanent, extend it beyond the October, or what modifications might be required. And I'm not presupposing, by the way, what those might be to you tonight. Giving you a couple of interesting quick facts. We've got about, 1,750 that could be here right now. And on given days, it's a little less. The District of Columbia, with all their new things that are approved, could potentially deploy about 17,000 scooters. And as you know, Alexandria's got its program underway as well. We have a lot of other issues that we're looking at, but overall, well, it's been an exciting ride so far, and my phone rings daily, and I am not riding the scooter every day, but it's a challenge, and I would hesitate to give you summary comments, from every person. We also have during this time, and this is another reason for extending the project, we'll do the formal community outreach, as we always do in Arlington, starting May 15th to June 15th. We don't even get the rest of our reporting done till July 15th, and with the board here in July, August, we felt it was appropriate. I've been talking to county manager staff, and I think we're all pretty much in agreement. We're trying to give the county board also a little more time so that we're not hitting them in October. I think we're going to be recommending at the manager level maybe a work session in September to help the county board also have time to move forward. We have about, another 20 or 30 appearances just before not only commissions like yours, second visits, the accessibility, disabled, aging communities, pedestrians, all those are very strong in what we're hearing about. We have some feedback from the blind community particularly. So we have a lot of issues, but we're also watching it all. I think I mentioned before that I'm involved in the regional group, so we meet regionally to talk. We meet with our vendors. I also wrote an article with some help for the April edition of the Virginia Municipal League's Town and City, talking about our pilot. There was also an article by one of the operators and a national article. So a lot going on, and still very new to us as we go through the pilot. So I'll be glad to answer questions, and hopefully you'll endorse the board taking this action at its May 18th board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Commissioner Bros.
Just curious how many operators now we have in the...
We have 7, 6 are now here. A company called Jump, which is We expected them to deploy their dockless bikes, but they have not done so yet, and we're waiting for that.
Aren't they really allowed to drop them off anywhere? Are they allowed to drop them off anywhere in the?
No,
Okay.
but they are not always complying with
Yes,
that.
I know.
Yes. Actually, let me add one quick thing, that we particularly had trouble at bus stops. And we didn't actually anticipate that in the MOA, but we approached them, and I will say that I've seen a significant improvement in not doing that.
Commissioner Clement.
Well, my original concern remains, and that is to what extent scooters are cutting into the bus mode share. And I was told that not to worry, that the real competition for Metro Bus is Uber and Lyft. However, I have seen on my sojourns around the county a lot of scooters parked strategically at bus stops. So I was wondering if you could, if you have any information on that.
Not enough to directly answer you specifically, but what we're this study, some of the feedback and the formal feedback, we're going to try to gain more information. Also, I'm glad you mentioned that. We also did a study. We didn't do a study. The graduate students, I think I'm going to hear it next week, from Virginia Tech, one of the classes, has done also an analysis, and I believe some of the things you're asking about, they actually had intercepts with direct users. We did that in the Roslyn area. We picked one area, and we kind of held them to that because we didn't want us, when we come out with a major survey we're doing in mid-May, we didn't want residents and businesses to get confused that are there two surveys or one? But I'll keep you updated on that. You're not the first person who's asked me that question. I don't have a good answer yet for you. Thank you, Commissioner Clement.
Commissioner Calkins.
Quick question about when you are going to release the data that you're collecting through the pilot. I know DDOT, when they made it through the first phase of their pilot, put together a really well-written report that showed a lot of the origin and destination patterns for scooters, which would kind of look to see if they were similar to Metro bus trips or if they were replacing walking trips. Is the intent, once the pilot, the extended pilot is done, to create kind of like a
yes.
booklet that explains
The answer is
how
yes.
scooters affected Arlington?
This before, yes, and some of that information, if you were looking online to the general data, you can see it a little bit, but nothing like you're talking about. You're talking about a good mixture of the whole thing. We have two working groups right now. that one is working on research and all of that. This Friday, since it didn't come up, I'll mention it to you, we launch with the county manager, county attorney, and a little working group, an ordinance working group, because as you know, if there are ordinance implications, so I'm anticipating that we'll go to the county board, depending on what's going on, for advertising approval in its October board meeting with some kind of action for the ordinance if there's going to be any recommended changes at its November board meeting. And as you may recall, and maybe all of you know it, at the General Assembly with the new bill, we have until January 1st, 2020 to make those changes. So a lot of moving parts going on right now. Thank you for that reminder, though. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Price.
I want to also thank you for all you're doing on this particular project. I think you do yeoman's work. You were at the Lehigh Highway Alliance e-scooter forum, and you took a lot of flack, and that's a very tough crowd, and you did fantastic in talking about our pilot program. So, as you know, I also am a member of the board of directors of the Lehigh Highway Alliance, and this morning, again, this topic came up about e-scooters, and people are still concerned because they still see people doing things that they shouldn't be doing, or functions they shouldn't be using these e-scooters on, like on sidewalks, or under people, doubling up on them, and they want to find a method for reporting them, because frankly they are like, oh, I don't know how to report this. I don't know how to contact the county, and I give them a phone number and say call. Is there a mechanism on the My Arlington app that would allow you to report such make such a report about an e-scooter?
I'm not sure. I have to be honest with you, I have to think that through. But we also, and it could be helpful, and I know it's not the same, and it's not as quick as an app would be, but the mobility at arlingtonva.us email that we have.
Right.
We have that monitored by one of our staff interns daily, and I also have our consultant monitoring it. Plus, I also get feedback from it.
And the reason why I'm asking is because people generally, they go to the sources that they know, the non-emergency, Arlington's non-emergency phone number, the non-police emergency phone number, as well as there's the I think, is it the DES non-emergency number as well?
Yes.
There are
I've gotten a couple things through that. Let me look at that tomorrow, because it's a good
it needs to
idea.
be some sort of, I guess, if as we're going forward through this warm period of weather, some way of reporting from the public, how these incidents that are occurring.
Thank you very much. We'll work on that.
Commissioner Calkins.
So I'm going to have a comment that probably is not going to be favorable by all. Have we had a conversation about increasing the speed limit to 15? I personally don't ride scooters because I don't have balance, but I have a significant number of friends who do. And one of their biggest challenges, and I think one of the reasons why we have the challenges we do, is because 10 miles an hour is not comfortable on the roadway, but it's excessively fast on the sidewalk. And I know that this conversation's happening in other jurisdictions across the country, but are we thinking about, as we move towards final regulations in the future, about having a deep dive conversation about what that right speed limit is?
I'm not being televised, am I? I'm just kidding. So the, oh no. So the answer is yes, and how can I say? So staff felt that we should raise it to 15, but then there was the issue of the sidewalk. And we didn't get to the point of doing that. On the other hand, on e-bikes, we had it at 15 and everyone else is at 20. So the county manager 2 weeks ago approved me raising it so that when they hit here, the bikes, we can evaluate them. There's nobody out there right now to evaluate. And I think you all knew it, the Lime dockless bikes that you were seeing, they were pulled nationwide. So the whole subject, but the answer is yes, and I suspect I'm suspecting there'll be a recommendation to raise it back to 15. I don't know that, but I suspect there will be, which is pretty well consistent. Of course, there's not a lot of good data, and the police department has different opinions, as you just said. It's a tough nut, and I expect at my meeting tomorrow where we're talking about ordinance, that's going to come up. Thank you very much.
I'm glad to see, hopeful that we will continue the pilot. I think it's useful information. I think e-scooters and definitely e-bikes have the potential to really help us with first mile, last mile access to transit and kind of expanding the walk shed for people. I'm not 100% convinced that this particular dockless model that we have is workable. It really puts a lot of faith in every single user to act responsibly, which I feel like we see everywhere is never a good solution to any problem. But I think it's useful information. I'm happy to see the pilot continue through the summer. And I concur with Commissioner Calkins that we've put scooters in a terrible no man's land of speed right now, where they're too fast to be on the sidewalk and they're too slow to be anywhere else. And so we're just increasing pedestrian conflict with the speed we've got them at. I hope that as we move towards final regulations, we're looking at something like increasing the speed limits and actually via ordinance banning them from the sidewalks now that they can get up to a speed that there's really no excuse for them to be there. So, commissioners have any other questions for Commissioner Yeri?
Yeah, just a question. In practical terms, what does the General Assembly action mean that Arlington is either enabled to do or prevented from doing in terms of scooter? Yeah, easy
well,
question.
we're allowed to regulate the sidewalk. We can keep them on or keep them off. At one time, there was a move down there that you couldn't be on the sidewalk. It went back and forth, and it ended up with, we have the ability to regulate the sidewalk, and they redefined, what they were. They did do a lot of upgrading of definitions. We were pretty far behind on a lot of these different options, and I think that was probably a good thing. And I will say that the operators, who of course wanted little control, or no interference, did not win that argument. So I think the state's moving in the right direction on that. Thank you.
Then I would move that the Transportation Commission recommend that the county board approve extension of the personal mobility pilot.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Abstentions? All right, there we go. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Mr. Larson.
So bad.
Item 7 is our last item, other commission business. Our next meeting is May 30th. Although this is May 30th, this was actually our June meeting. 30th.
I believe Fire Station 8 PFRC just kicked off, which means we're going to need a Transportation Commission representative for that. So if anybody is particularly interested in the highway or fire stations or PFRCs where the transportation probably won't be very controversial.
They're actually the only transportation, I'm chairing the PFRC. It's the curb cut could very well be widened, and that might cause some needing to rejigger that intersection right there, which apparently has for years been a difficult one. The community has never been happy with it. So there is that would probably be the transportation component of this.
Okay, so if you're interested in the highway or fire stations, let me know, because we could use a TC rep on that PFRC. All right. I believe we are adjourned.
You're like, yes, ride home, please. And this way at least I get to be